And so one lesson learned is no matter what your path has been, you're gaining something from everything you do. So always be aware of how all your experiences contribute to who you are and what you have to offer. Don't think, oh, since I transitioned from this other career in engineering, that has nothing to give me as a coach. No, that has a lot to give you as a coach. And so don't diminish any of your experiences, any of your life experiences or your training or your career experiences in terms of what it offers you as a coach. If you're working with the Enneagram, what advantage do you have, both in just being able to really do excellent work with people that really moves the needle, and what selling points does it have for you as a practitioner and for your clients? I'm a self-preservation dominant, so I like an outline and an overview. I'm a self-preservation 2 in the Enneagram. As a good 2, not having a strong sense of self when I was in my early 20s, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I just did what some people might do, is I just kept going to school. I got a PhD in communications studies, which for me meant mass media and politics. So I know a lot about mass media and politics. And as you can imagine, I'm kind of a news junkie these days. And so I got that PhD, but toward the end of that process, I learned the Enneagram because I happened to be a very close friend of David Daniels' youngest son. So I learned it from David Daniels himself, from Dr. Daniels, who many of you know, worked with, or have heard of, really one of the pioneers of the Enneagram in the US. And he was just telling me that he thought it was his calling. And it was very interesting to me to hear this Stanford-based psychiatrist saying this Enneagram thing was his calling, and that he was creating an Enneagram school with Helen Palmer, who was, let's face it, a psychic, an intuitive. So very interesting. And he told me over dinner one night, I know you're not supposed to do this, but he said, I think you might be a 2. So I went home and I read about myself in Helen's book, her first book, and it absolutely blew my mind. I hadn't been interested in psychology at that point. I went to UCLA as an undergrad and I studied English literature and history. And I only took one psychology class as an undergrad, and it was the only class the whole time I got a C in. I think that was because I found it sort of boring. To me, psychology was like giving jargony names to things that were really obvious. Because as a 2, I was already paying attention to what makes people tick and what was going on with people. So to me, it seemed the basic psychology class seemed sort of boring, but the Enneagram changed all that. I was fascinated by it, and especially how it helped me understand myself in a way that I didn't think possible by any typology at that time. So I got really into the Enneagram. I moved back from Northwestern, where I got my PhD in mass media and politics, and I started doing some teaching there as a graduate student. And so one lesson learned is no matter what your path has been, you're gaining something from everything you do. So always be aware of how all your experiences contribute to who you are and what you have to offer. Don't think, oh, since I transitioned from this other career in engineering, that has nothing to give me as a coach. No, that has a lot to give you as a coach. And so don't diminish any of your experiences, any of your life experiences or your training or your career experiences in terms of what it offers you as a coach. That's one of the good things about being a practitioner, a coach, a therapist, because you are the instrument in many ways. You're bringing you to your interaction with your clients, and that's the most powerful thing. So anything that feeds you, anything that educates you, anything that makes you who you are and the multi-talented person you are is valuable. So I went through the Palmer Daniels narrative training in 96 and 97, got into my own psychotherapy for the first time after I was in a women's group. And one day the therapist turned to me and she said, "So B, what do you need from the group today?" And if you're a 2 or you know a 2, you know that was a question I couldn't answer. And when she asked just something simple, what do you need from the group today? And I had no idea. It was like I looked inside, like, what do I need? What's the answer to that question? And I had no idea. And it was sort of a moment of existential anxiety of like, there's nothing in there. So again, this was sort of the beginning of my journey, realizing I needed to maybe do some inner work. I grew up in Palo Alto, California. There was a lot of emphasis on education. I just never would have gone to therapy myself. It was funny because after that women's group ended, the therapist who led that group actually called me up and said, "So, would you like to come do some therapy with me? And I very passively said, okay. And that was the beginning of many years in therapy myself. And that's another lesson learned is do your own work. This is probably my number one lesson learned. You probably all already know this one, but I can't emphasize it enough. You need to do your own self-development work. You need to have a good relationship with yourself, right? And that's what we get when we do the inner work. And of course, you have the benefit of knowing the Enneagram, one of probably the best self-development tool available. But therapy, coaching, different kinds of therapy, whatever you're drawn to, whatever you feel like will help you grow in the particular person you are, don't stop doing inner work, because not only are we working with these things, the best way to understand how to work with the Enneagram is to be using it yourself and to not be thinking you've arrived, but to continue working with it all the time. So after I got into therapy, and in those first 3 years of therapy, and my therapist was a great woman who was a 4. And she really helped connect me with my feelings, because in the early days, 2s, I think on the early part of the growth path, tend to not be very connected to their own feelings. Even though we're emotional types, we're a little bit 3-ish in the beginning, where we can repress our feelings. And you can ask me what I'm feeling. I don't know what I'm feeling. I know what you're feeling, but I don't know what I'm feeling because my attention goes so much out there. My therapist would ask me, what are you feeling? And I wouldn't know. I said, I don't know. What am I feeling? And as a good 4, she sort of built a bridge through her empathy between me and my own feelings. So I learned so much in those first years of therapy, including that I didn't really want to be an academic, right? So I was headed toward being a professor in communication studies, mass media and politics, and all the jobs in that field are in the Midwest. I had moved back to California. I kind of wanted to stay in California. And so I realized in that therapy, and again, this is one reason to do your inner work, is you realize more what you're meant to do, what you want to do, what you're going to enjoy doing. And so I learned in my therapy that I wanted to go back to school and become a psychotherapist. So I went back to school at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. Some of you may know it. And I did a master's in clinical psychology there to become a psychotherapist. And that program was really good because it really focused on the experience of being a therapist. I didn't really need more academic training or research training about being a psychologist. I had academic training, which helped in that program. So I became a psychotherapist. And by that time, I had been studying the Enneagram for 9 years. And by the way, when I started studying psychology in graduate school, I had known the Enneagram for 6 years. So it was fascinating to go through my program, because I started seeing the Enneagram as this grand theory of psychology in which all these different kinds of therapies or theories of psychological development fit into the Enneagram as this master map. I believe the Enneagram comes from ancient wisdom, and one of the reasons that I believe that is because of my experience going through psychology school and seeing how the Enneagram, kind of like the way Blake describes it in the book, The Intelligent Enneagram, it makes sense of other things that you bring into it. So object relations theory, and there's a lot of threefold theories, stage theories in psychological developmental theory that fit into the Enneagram. So the Enneagram really almost helped me in my education, understanding and making sense of things. It's a sense-making framework.